Think of a number between 1 and 10. Was it 7? Try this joke again until it's 7. Hey kids, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Uncle Frank, hoping that you are having a great day. And in today's video, we are going to be talking about comic books, novels, and one of my favorite characters in the world of fiction. You see, in the early 1970s, Marvel Comics decided that they were going to start adapting Conan the Barbarian from the Hyborian Age onto their regular lineup. He became a monthly comic starting in 1970 with writer Roy Thomas and a bunch of artists, including Barry Smith. And this was honestly a pretty cool comic run in the very beginning. I've read that initial Conan run a few times, and the art's pretty solid. The story, the writing overall is pretty enjoyable, and it's kind of hard to swallow Conan the Barbarian as a Marvel character for what it is, but you got to remember that, you know, the older you get with Marvel Comics, the more experimental it kind of felt. There was all kinds of stories being told, not just by Marvel, obviously, but by DC as well. But it felt very much like Marvel in particular was very, very willing to branch out. They weren't just superhero comics even back then. Now, a few years later, in 1973, Conan number 23 came along and introduced a new character to the mythos invented exclusively by Marvel for the Conan line, and her name was Red Sonja. And she was billed as this fiery, red-headed swordswoman who was Conan's equal in combat. And this character turned out to be very popular. So popular, in fact, that in almost no time at all, she got her own comic run, Red Sonja, She-Devil with a Sword, which has honestly been one of the more impressive additions to the sword and sorcery genre. And for what felt like the next almost 20 years, nearly Red Sonja and Conan would have intermingled adventures in the more fantasy focused Hyborian Age within Marvel Comics. But over time, some interesting and further experimental products for the character would come out, especially in the mid-'80s. There was, in 1985, I think, it was a Red Sonja movie, which followed in the footsteps of the Conan films. And while the Conan films were pretty awesome, if I'm going to be honest, you know, the Schwarzenegger films, they were pretty great. The Red Sonja film in particular felt like the bias inside of me wants to praise it, but the casual film critic within me is like, it's not as good as Conan. And it's kind of true. It's not as good as Conan. It's still enjoyable. It's better than a lot of the other weirder 80s films I've watched, but the Red Sonja movie was not as good as I kind of wanted it to be. You know? But that wasn't the only interesting thing to come out of Red Sonja, the franchise, in the 80s. There was also this stack of novels. 6 in total, to the best of my knowledge, were released. The Ring of Ikribu, Demon Knight, When Hell Laughs, Thor's Daughter, Against the Prince of Hell, and finally, Star of Doom. And these were all written by David C. Smith and Richard L. Tierney, as it says here on the cover. And this was a rather, for context, you know, how many comic book characters break out into other forms of written media? Not many. So for Red Sonja, a character created just for comics, to end up getting her own line of sword and sorcery novels, I think that was pretty interesting. And once I had the opportunity to pick these up a few years ago, I did so and read through them, and on my other channel, Lore Seeker, I did individual video reviews of them. And, you know, even now, just a few years later, I still think these are phenomenal. My opinion on the individual books has changed somewhat. I no longer think The Ring of Akribu is the best one. Now I think it's End of Thor's Daughter. But that's just because of... I recently did a reread through the entire series in preparation of the newest Red Sonja book that's come out that I actually still haven't gotten around to reading yet. So funny news that I intend to get around to that in the next few weeks, hopefully. But I reread through all the old books just to kind of prime myself for Red Sonja fiction again. And on second reading, I found End of Thor's Daughter to be the most enjoyable one overall. It's the one with the vampire in it. So there's that. And Star of Doom was kind of overall the weakest. Kind of felt like a big fetch quest for a video game, reading through that book again. But overall, yeah, Red Sonja was a character originally just created as a side character for Conan the Barbarian, proved to be popular enough to get her own comic line, and then she was, I guess Marvel had enough faith in the character to let her get her own movie and her own novels. And that's all well and good. And remember, this was Marvel. They owned the rights to the character at the time. That did change in the 90s. I want to say it was 91, but it was probably 90. Marvel actually ended up selling the rights to Conan the Barbarian, and when he went, so did Red Sonja. You would think that Conan and Red Sonja would stick together in terms of property rights, but that actually was not the case. Conan ended up being his own thing by a different company, and Red Sonja ended up being her own thing owned by another company. She ended up being picked up by Dynamite Entertainment after a while. And Dynamite's made some pretty solid comic books with the character. Some I like, some aren't so great. She gets a lot of crossovers with characters like Tarzan and Vampirella, Betty and Veronica. That was weird. But yeah, overall, Red Sonja is one of my favorite fictional characters. Not just because she is the sexy sword lady, but because she's a pretty interesting example of a character made as a side character for freaking Conan the Barbarian, who ended up getting her own entire series, including, like I said, some genuinely solid novels. If you haven't given these a read, if you are a fan of sword and sorcery like me, and you have not read these, I highly recommend them if you can pick them up. They're all pretty well written. I legitimately only think Star of Doom at this point, upon second reading, I think Star of Doom is the weakest one, and it's still pretty enjoyable for what it is. So, all things considered, I like Red Sonja a lot. And I like a lot of what's come out for the character in the last few decades. Where is this all going? Well, there's a film coming out for her soon. I saw the trailer. I saw the initial teaser trailer for it. And yeah, I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it. I hope it's good. And overall, yeah, I really just hope it's good. That's all I have for you kids today. Just one old man in his garage talking about one of his favorite comic book characters. She's not my absolute favorite sword and sorcery character. That's still going to be Conan the Barbarian. I freaking love Conan. I've seen all the Conan movies, including the weird mid-2000s one. I love them all. I enjoy most of the comic runs, too. Conan's a great character. I love him so much. But yeah, that's really all I got for you kids today. Just reminiscing about a comic character I like. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, share, subscribe, and a comment down below. Who is your favorite sword and sorcery character? Do you have a favorite sword and sorcery character? Do you even know what sword and sorcery is? I'd love to hear about it. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. We've reached the end of the video, which means it's time for a viewer question. And Flytrap 8 Force, which is definitely an interesting name, asks, what are the chances of us getting an English release of Yu-Gi-Oh! Rush Duels? And I'm going to be completely honest, buddy. I think the chances are fairly low at this point. Konami has shown us several times over the last few years that they are in the business of making some pretty boneheaded decisions. And they've had, honestly, a few really good opportunities to give us English Rush Duel releases. The fact that they haven't tells me that either A, they just have zero faith in the product in the West, or B, it's probably not really testing all that popularly on the There's 2 Yu-Gi-Oh games out right now. One of them lets you play Rush Duels. I don't remember which one is which, but I'm guessing that the one that does have Rush Duels doesn't have Rush Duels being all that popular. So right now, although I would very much like an English Rush Duels release, like I cannot stress this enough, I would love to play some Rush Duels, collect them, buy them, etc. I don't foresee it happening in the near future, which is a shame, but it is what it is.